Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles and CMF. Talk, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles. How's things? Optimistic things are great. How's things with you? Hello, Miles and CMF. T, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles and everyone. One love, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles and CMF. Jason, good to see you. Brother, how you doing? How you been? Hey, Miles and CMF. Comatose, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good to see everyone tuning in one by one. Let's go. Good evening, Miles and CMF family. Funky brother, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Morning, Miles and CMF. Shelly, good to see you. How you doing? Morning. How you been? What's up, Miles? What's up, CMF? Kerry, good to see you. How you doing, brother? How you been? How you been, Funky? I've been doing great, Funky brother. How's things with you? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Erin, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hello, Miles. Scott, good to see you, brother. How you doing? How you been? Hello, CMF. Doy, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles. How are you doing? I'm doing great. Good to see you. Kenny, how's things with you? Are we expecting another vote in a while? Yes, we are. Greetings, Miles and CMF. Ray, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? So regarding the vote situation, we already had one vote and it didn't pass. Surprisingly, 13 Republicans voted against a crypto, essentially, stablecoin bill, which is the Genius Act. But we're going to get a second vote in. Good evening, Miles and CMF and all in CMF. Adi, good to see you. How you doing? How you've been? So, a lot of things have been happening, which we're going to discuss on tonight's live. But before we discuss any news articles, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto House Family. My name is Miles, and I'm hosting a live that you're watching right now. You can tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time, for the most recent news that's happening around the world, and essentially in regards of cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations, pretty much everything you know about regarding this world transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As on this live as well, which means if you do have any questions or any statements to make, put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to answer the questions you may have. And a disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, if you're a regular, let's go CMF. By the way, thank you so much to everyone right now who has already liked this live, retweeted this live on X, and put a comment outside the live or hashtag anything you want outside live on X. And thanks so much to everyone on YouTube right now who's watching, who's also liked the live as well. CMF members, if you haven't liked or retweeted this live, like and retweet, and let's expand the CMF family. As I said, I have big plans for the CMF. We need to expand this family first, and I can't do it without your help. So like and retweet. Good evening, Miles and CMF. SB, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Miles, not good. Week so far. Yeah, funky brother. Good point on that one. So we had the first voting for essentially the crypto week, and it failed. The first essentially vote was regarding the Genius Act, which was the most simplest and basic essentially crypto regulation that could have been passed. And it failed. 13 Republicans essentially, voted on no regarding a stablecoin bill. However, there is a second chance. We're going to get a revote happening today as well, or essentially the next few days. But it's not no as an indefinite. It can be overturned. How's your day been, Miles? And CMF missed parts of the live while essentially on yesterday. Just caught up. Thanks for the birthday love. It meant a lot. Let's go, Lena. Good to see how you're doing. ISO 22 going live on Crypto Week and Grayscale's ETF, all negative at the moment. It's true. Grayscale's essentially ETF with the SEC, essentially approving it and then pausing it, and now Grayscale essentially suing the SEC, not suing it, but pursuing to essentially push further. And then we have, on the other hand, the Crypto Week, which the first bill essentially got to fail, and then the ISO 200 situation going live. That really had no relevance so far because we don't have regulations, to be fairly honest. But yes, okay. Let's go for the first news on tonight's live because there's a lot of things to discuss so everybody can have a better understanding of what's happening right now. Now, the first news we're going to go for on tonight's live is regarding tariffs. So here it is. President Trump announces the U.S. has reached a deal with the government of Indonesia. President Donald Trump says he's made a deal with Indonesia, but has yet to share any specific details about the agreement so far. He posted on Truth Social, "Great deal for everybody just made with Indonesia. I dealt with them directly with their highly respected president." This is Trump's fourth trade agreement since introducing the reciprocal tariffs back in April. Until now, he had only struck deals with the United Kingdom, China, and Vietnam, with Indonesia now becoming the latest addition. Only last week, President Trump warned that he would essentially slap a 32% tariff on Indonesia exports from August 1st. It seems like Indonesia gave up on the idea of going head-to-head with Trump and decided just to sign an agreement. Indonesia responded to the threat by sending its lead trade, essentially envy, to engage with Trump's cabinet to reach an agreement, which they already have, apparently according to Trump. The country's coordinating essentially Minister for Economic Affairs met with the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson, Commerce Secretary Howard Linton, and the Treasury Secretary Scott Benson to discuss trade deals. Earlier this month, President Trump also reached deals with Vietnam's government also. The U.S. now imposes only 20% on goods from Vietnam entering the U.S. and 40% levy on essentially transshipping. The transshipping essentially tariffs mean that any country that uses Vietnam to export its products to the United States will face a 40% tariff. Vietnam also had to open its markets completely to the U.S., charging 0% tariffs. So far, it seems that the tariffs are working perfectly fine. Additionally, the US and China agreed on tariff essentially truce also. The two economies, however, set a deadline for their truce to August 12th. On essentially today, the Treasury Secretary Scott Benson hinted at the possibility of extending the tariff truce with China. He pointed out that their talks with China are in very good places right now. And like the Indonesian deal, essentially Trump was also the first to announce their deal with Vietnam. However, according to sources, the Vietnamese government was surprised by Trump's announcement of the deal and is still looking into how it can reduce the 20% rate. They claimed essentially that Vietnam's party chief Tu Lam, after his last call with Trump, instructed his team to continue efforts to lower their tariff rates. Reportedly, Vietnam has believed that it had secured a better tariff rate than 20% Trump announced. The Vietnamese government was pushing for tariffs between 10 to 15%, according to Bloomberg. The US-Vietnam deal was hardly mentioned in local news. And essentially, moreover, shortly after Trump's Truth Social post and agreement, the country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the negotiators were still finalizing the agreement deals. So far, Vietnam's leadership has been noticeably quiet on specific issues. Rather than addressing it directly, Prime Minister Palm has only spoken about Vietnam's broader goals of diversifying their exports and supplying to adjust to their tariff changes. Last Friday, the Secretary of State of Marco Rubio hinted that his understanding essentially of Vietnam's position, claiming that the Asian nation wanted to have a levy rate that's at least essentially as good as it can essentially get, if not better. Other countries that don't have a trade agreement with essentially the United States. Throughout the negotiations, Vietnam tried to maintain its relationship with China. Washington has essentially consistently asked Vietnam to block Chinese goods from being rerouted and repackaged through the country to avoid higher tariffs. With the 40% tariff in place, Beijing has stated that it will review the agreement to determine whether its interests have been affected. Meanwhile, Prime Minister essentially Mark Carney acknowledged for the first time that the trade deal he's negotiating essentially with the United States president is almost certain to include tariffs. Speaking essentially in France, and then Tuesday morning, essentially today morning, before a cabinet meeting, he noted that the lack of evidence that the US is offering in terms of tariff-free agreements. Mark Carney also essentially remarks Canadian officials had remained hopeful for a nearly tariff-free relationship as a part of the proposed trade and essentially security deal. Now, according to essentially Christian Hillman, the country's ambassador to Washington and chief negotiator, Canadian essentially objectives remain straightforward. In an interview with CTV News last month, she emphasized that the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement secured a 99% essentially tariff-free trading relationship with the US, which Canada views as a fair and balanced deal. So apparently Trump has come to another agreement with another country. Indonesia essentially came to the table and signed some sort of agreement, according to essentially Trump's words on his own Truth Social network. And nothing's been confirmed so far, but if it is true, then that's another country that has signed some sort of agreement of tariffs, which is great. Essentially, the faster we move on from tariffs, the better it is for the entire market space. So it's good to see that something positive is coming out of tariffs as we keep on moving forward. And, you know, countries are starting to give in to the idea of going head-to-head with Trump, realizing that's a really bad idea. Now, moving on from essential tariff news to the crypto week. Now, the votes are happening right now inside the Crypto Week regarding the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and the Anti-CBDC Act. The Clarity Act is obviously the biggest one we need. It brings clarity towards the crypto space in terms of securities and commodities and everything else. The Genius Act is only essentially favorable towards stablecoins, and the Anti-CBDC Act is essentially the United States trying to be a part of CBDCs and also not be a part of CBDCs. It's a very weird scenario. It's just that the Fed can't create a CBDC. So, Tom Hemmer leads a push to make the US crypto capital happen. Congressman Tom Hemmer is driving efforts to make America the crypto capital by advancing the Clarity Act. This includes provisions from the Securities Clarity Act and the Blockchain Essentially Regulatory Certainty Act also. The initiative essentially aims to install confidence in developers and investors with the Clarity Act. Tom Hemmer, a key figure in crypto legislations, has a history with bills like the Crypto ATM Fraud Prevention Act. His work essentially seeks to define the regulatory boundaries for digital asset securities, reducing uncertainty and fostering innovation. High-profile supporters, including Coin Center essentially and Blockchain Association, endorse these measures for the crypto space. The United States has a real opportunity to lead and deliver on President Trump's promise to make America the crypto capital of the world. The Clarity Act, with our Securities Clarity Act and essentially BRCA included, unlocks this opportunity and finally gives developers and investors the confidence they need to innovate and build here at home, which is referring to the United States. Those are the words from Congress, Tom Hemmer. The legislation provides regulatory certainty, potentially attracting capital and boosting liquidity inside the US, essentially crypto capital markets. It's true. The faster the United States establishes some sort of regulations, obviously the faster more institutions that are outside the United States who have left the United States due to essentially Biden's era of crypto scrutiny will come back to the United States, and more investments will come towards the blockchain space in the United States because of these regulations, especially the Clarity Act. By essentially excluding specific developers from being labeled as money transmitters, the act might reduce compliance costs for non-custodial DeFi products. This could also lead to higher trading volumes in major digital assets and an increase in domestic investments inside the United States. Backers and supporters expected to anchor the US as a leader in digital innovation, with potential essentially impacts on pricing and adoption of cryptocurrencies. Expert opinions and official reports from congressional leaders emphasizes this legislation role in preventing regulatory overlaps and advancing sector growths. Historically, US crypto legislations often lacked long-term influence, yet this essentially effort is backed by a presidential essentially endorsements. The Clarity Act addresses the industry's concerns, promoting higher total value locked and encouraging on-chain essentially investments with the United States protocols. This initiative essentially posts potential outcomes like increased staking flows and more regulated frameworks. The United States House is essentially set to vote on the Genius Act this afternoon with key support from President Trump, which the first stage of votings, the Genius Act failed to pass in the first essentially stage of votings. Now there is going to be a second voting as well. This bill essentially seeks to position the US as a global digital asset leader influencing stablecoin regulation. In a bold move, President Trump threw his support behind the Genius Act, highlighting essentially a pivotal shift in the US digital asset landscape. Supported by key Republican leaders, the bill aims to secure America's leading role in digital space. The Genius Act will impose stricter stablecoin regulations, mandating a one-to-one liquid essentially reserve and monthly disclosures, thereby increasing transparency while potentially raising issuer compliance costs. The changes anticipate boosting institutional trust while shifting the competitive landscape among stablecoin issuers. Now, for some of you might raise questions on why has there been 13 Republicans who voted against the Genius Act bill. It makes genuinely no sense why 13 Republicans will go out of the way to vote against a cryptocurrency bill, which is related to essentially to stablecoins. Now, politicians aren't the most brightest bulbs. Let's just be honest with ourselves. They're all thieves. Politicians are naturally thieves and liars. But why would a group of politicians that don't understand essential stablecoins or vote against something the President of the United States has endorsed himself personally, which is the Genius Coin essentially? And the Genius Act essentially brings in more liquidity inside the United States, brings in more essentially investments and more investments in general back to the United States, making it look like the capital of cryptocurrency. So why would 13 Republicans be against it? The only reason politicians' actions are always based on who essentially is standing behind the politician. And in this case, these 13 Republicans, someone is telling them to vote against it, or someone is paying them off to vote essentially against this scenario as well. Some people might say this is ludicrous, but let's just be honest with ourselves. A Genius Act bill is positive for the United States, is positive for certain stablecoins. It's not positive for other stablecoins. Somebody like Tether, for example, a stablecoin bill is not really the best option for them in any sort of a way, because USDT knows that the moment a stablecoin bill is passed, it's game over for Tether, completely game over for Tether. Because the bill does state that essentially, the favorable stablecoins will be the stablecoins that are essentially headquartered in the United States. As I said previously, you cannot have a stablecoin essentially that's based in El Salvador to be the biggest money printer of digital dollars when the United States is right there. It makes no sense. It's like if Mexico became the biggest printer of the British pounds in a digital version. Makes no sense for the UK to be approving Mexico's digital British pounds when they could essentially their headquarters could just be inside the UK. It genuinely makes no sense. So Tether is the first one to pretty much be kicked out as a stablecoin bill essentially is passed inside the United States, unless Tether pays the way through it, like sometimes they do. But for example, the EU kicked out Tether for transparency issues and not holding assets inside the EU. Circle had no issues about that whatsoever with their EuroC essentially token and their USDC. So these 13 politicians, these 13 Republicans that voted against this bill, well, we know for a fact that politicians aren't the most brightest bulbs. They're all thieves and big liars. So somebody's telling them to vote no. My guess would be people who don't want that bill to pass. And it's not going to be essentially a Maxine Waters or essentially Pocahontas that's telling these Republicans not to vote in that favor. It could be, but I think there's a big agenda essentially behind it where certain companies or certain essentially stablecoins don't want that bill to pass because they know that essentially their days are numbered. But the good news is there's going to be a second round of votes on the Genius Act. And we know Trump. And Trump isn't a man that's just going to give up on certain, essentially, his own ideologies or beliefs. He pushes through and finds a way. The same way, essentially, that Jerome Powell said he's never resigning by 2026. He's still going to be sitting in that seat as the chairman of the, essentially, of the Fed. Jerome Powell seems like he's about to be resigning. So essentially, Trump's push or whatever Trump found in him is working. So as the point I'm trying to make is Trump is not the type of person to give up easily. He fights for what he stands. And those 13 Republicans, what idiots, because they voted against essentially the United States bringing in huge amounts of capital. But as I said, the good news is we're going to get a second vote on that. But, the Genius bill, the stablecoin bill, essentially is favorable for certain stablecoin companies and not so favorable for other essentially stablecoin companies. We know which ones are going to favor from a stablecoin bill. Ripple is going to favor from a stablecoin bill with RLUSD. So is Circle with USDC. Tether is not going to be favorable regarding the Genius Act bill. Let's just be honest with ourselves. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer emphasized the act's importance for U.S. innovation. These pieces of legislation are vital to ensuring America is at the forefront of innovation in digital asset space. I look forward to essentially enacting the Genius Act into law and to working essentially with colleagues to move the Clarity Act through the Senate in short order, Tom Emmer said. Republican leaders, including Patrick McHenry, have voiced strong approvals, broadcasting confidence in the initiatives and potential to redefine future digital asset governance. Pending regulatory clarity under the Genius Act, the U.S. could see notable increases in stablecoin essential activity. Stricter compliance may drive smaller issuers out, consolidating essentially market share with federally backed projects. Impeding essentially crypto legislation such as the Clarity Act could prevent another massive crypto essentially collapse, according to lawmakers. Also, having a Clarity Act inside the United States will stop situations, for example, like FTX, ever happening again. The U.S. House Essentially Rules Committee met on Monday to essentially discuss these three bills, including the Digital Asset Market Clarity, the Clarity Act, which was introduced at the end of June with the aim of providing a clear regulatory framework for essentially the crypto industry. Republican Representative French Hill said that without these regulations, another FTX-type collapse could occur. If we don't have regulations inside the United States, then there are going to be still too many gray areas where institutions could pretty much get away with everything, and we can again have massive collapses. That's why it's very important to go into essentially regulations. If the existing essentially ad hoc process remains in place, I'm convinced we'll continue to see future FTX-like situations because consumers are essentially not afraid not essentially afraid of the careful protections included essentially in this legislations. Hill also emphasized the bill imposes strict consumer and market protections, including essentially prohibition on essentially mingling customer funds. This directly addresses one of FTX's major failures, where customers' deposits were illegally essentially used for other purposes due to gray areas. Also, there are also capital requirements that ensures firms maintain adequate reserves. This is what certain companies essentially fear when it comes to regulations. Just to repeat this sentence again, there are also capital requirements that ensures firms maintain adequate reserves. Particular firms, essentially inside the crypto space, don't want regulations because they have to prove their reserves or hold their reserves in certain places. And well, we know Tether's checkered past. Also, Strategy's checkered past, where MicroStrategy, essentially Michael Saylor, came out on live stage and said, why do you have to show crypto reserves? Nobody should be showing their crypto reserves as a crypto company, which is the most ludicrous thing anybody could have said on a live stage. But the adequate reserves, record-keeping obligations, creating audit trails and transparency, and conflicts of interest provisions preventing self-dealing that contributed to FTX's downfall. That's another thing essentially certain crypto companies don't want. The reason why some crypto companies want regulations to happen and some crypto companies don't want regulations to happen is because of transparency. They have to essentially show their audits. They have to be essentially abiding by the laws that are put into place. Some companies don't like that idea. Hill also argued that the current system has gaps that leave consumers unprotected, which is very true. For too long, American digital assets regimes has been delivered in a worst place world. Regulations by enforcements that essentially stifles responsible innovation and existing essential commodities and security regulatory frameworks that plagued by the gaps that leave consumers unprotected and investors very confused due to gray areas. Rather than the current regulations by enforcement approach, the bill provides clear definitions of digital commodities and assets, specific essentially disclosure requirements for fundraising and retail essentially investor protections through carefully calibrated resale limitations. It also gives authorities and oversights of centralized exchanges to the Commodities and Futures Trading Commission. We are not creating loopholes, we are closing the regulatory gaps, which is very important, very important. And essentially crypto's most powerful super PAC, just to add this on top, crypto's most powerful super PAC, Fairshake. Fairshake gets investments from Coinbase and Ripple to put money into politicians' pockets to vote in favor of crypto regulations. So Fairshake, one of the most essentially most powerful super PACs for the crypto space, is also preparing for a high-stakes 2026 midterm election cycle with $141 million in their hands. The total essentially includes $52 million raised in the first half of 2025 and $25 million contributed by Coinbase. Since election day 2024, the group and its affiliates have collected $109 million. Fairshake's essentially renowned strategy focus on pushing crypto-friendly candidates to victory while urging Congress to regulate digital assets responsibly. Besides Fairshake's affiliated essentially PACs like essentially Defend American Jobs plans to spend aggressively next year, these groups have already provided their influence and proved their influence. Last year, they spent $40 million backing Republican candidates Bernie Sanders, for example. He defeated the crypto critic Senator essentially Sherrod Brown in November. Fairshake is now seen as the key player in shaping the US crypto regulations through political funding. So on one side, we could have essentially the crypto companies or even institutions that don't want regulations to pass because they love the idea of gray areas. Some companies like gray areas because it means that they can operate as much as they want freely, hoping that, obviously the SEC and CFTC don't come knocking on their doors. Some institutions and crypto companies want to be regulated because regulations creates this mature, space for the crypto space where investors feel confidence essentially entering into the crypto space. But those are the legitimate crypto companies, and then we have the unlegitimate essential crypto companies that don't like the idea of crypto regulations. But those 13 Republicans that voted against the first essentially bill, the Genius Act, which we're going to get a second vote on, what idiots to be paid off to ruin the American economy. Now, before we go through the next news, which is regarding JP Morgan, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's going on in there. Then we go straight into the next news. So let's see where we're at. We were at here, I think. Yeah, here. Miles, I thought Paul Atkins was pro-crypto, so why is he appealing against XRP as a security? He's not appealing against XRP as a security. It's the injunction that's the issue. The appeal is not the situation. It's not about the clarity of XRP as a token. XRP in itself is not a security, and he is pro-crypto, and it's got not to do with XRP as a security category. It's the other basis situation. Hi, Miles. Michael, good to see you. How you doing? How you today? I'm doing great, Michael. How you been? Hi, brother. Kamal, good to see you, brother. How you doing? How you been? Semper says, even Miles, the CMF peeps. Good to see you, Semper. How you doing? Fuck it. Afternoon, Scott. Hi, Scott. What's up, CMF? Christopher, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Today on BTC, pullback again, a little bit. Yes. Hi, Miles of CMF. George, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Share the live. Let's go, Scott. Let's go, XRP, XLM, XDC, ACH, HBAR, Algo. Let's go, Scott. Democrats are trying all angles just to keep the US behind. The Democrats are all essentially negative on any crypto bill. Let's just be fairly honest with ourselves. The 13 Republicans that essentially back the Democrats is the interesting part. Good evening, Miles of CMF, Bull XRP. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Evening all. Susie, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Trump really needs to fire Jerome Powell so the rest of the senators wouldn't dare to go against Trump. I agree. Then investigate that Elizabeth Warren one by one, really clean up the house. I agree. If I'm not mistaken, Paul Atkins is pro-crypto or no. Interesting if he's challenging XRP. He's not challenging XRP in any sort of way, and he is pro-crypto. Ripple should move abroad. I think they will do extremely well. Ripple already is abroad. It's just abroad is also bringing in regulations too. Hi, Miles of CMF. Stormy, good to see you. Well, how you doing? How you been? So if they vote no again later today, what happens? It gets scrapped? No. If they vote no again, it won't get scrapped. It will just get re-edited and back into voting. So has the Clarity Act, where was I? So if you know, hi, when all this case essentially and all things are over and see the bull run of higher prices. Johnny, good to see how you doing, how you been. Let the crypto week pass and let's see how it's going to go on first. So has the Clarity Act also not passed? No, it's just the Genius Act. It's one by one. The Genius Act hasn't been passed yet. The first voting essentially was a no. We still have a second round of votings to go. It's just the Genius Act, not the Clarity Act or the Anti-CBDC Act, just the first one now. Hi, hello, Miles and CMF, good to see you as well. Lottie, how you been? How's things? Miles, the injunction? Yes, the injunction that's going on. Hello, hello, my friend. It's been a while. Let's go, Scott. Now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency hater JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon backtracked again. So as essentially the three bills are right now, on the stages of being voted on, one of them has already been voted on, the Genius Act. They got to know the second round of voting is to go on. So as that voting situation is going on regarding stablecoins, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, on the other hand, sees actually sees stablecoins expanding. So here it is. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon says he doesn't quite understand the appeal of stablecoins, but he also says he can't afford to sit on the sidelines. This message from Jamie Dimon attracted attention while answering questions about stablecoin technology at the balance sheets meeting held today. Stablecoins, as their name suggests, are cryptocurrencies typically pegged essentially to fiat currencies like the US dollars, aiming for stability in value. Last month, JP Morgan essentially announced the development of a limited stablecoin solution designed exclusively for its own clients. However, a more general stablecoin is expected to appeal to a much more broader user base. As JP Morgan, we will be involved in both our own deposit coin and stablecoins. We want to understand the space and become essentially a pro-efficient in it, Damon said. He also went on to say stablecoins are real. However, I still don't fully understand why you would want to use a stablecoin instead of making a payment directly. Also, he wanted to say, Damon essentially 6'9", he's known for his criticism of cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin. However, JP Morgan's massive presence in the sector with a daily global payment volume of approximately $10 trillion means the company cannot afford to neglect an emerging payment, essentially technology. Dimon also stated that the fintech companies trying to create alternatives to traditional banking systems pose a threat, saying that these guys are very smart. They want to create bank accounts, access payment systems, and offer reward programs. Who is essentially Jamie Dimon referring to right now when he says these guys are very smart. They pose a threat. They want to create bank accounts, access payment systems, and offer reward programs. The person essentially that Jamie Dimon is essentially referring to, or the company that he's referring to, is Ripple. Ripple essentially becoming a essentially a banking essentially firm, applying for a banking charter, also applying for a Fed account. Jamie Dimon is saying that essentially any blockchain companies that's applying for bank account, essentially a Fed account, Fed Masters account, and a banking charter license is a threat to traditional banks. This way to do this is to be active in this area. So Jamie Dimon is saying that JP Morgan has to adapt to a blockchain world, or it's going to fall behind companies like Ripple. Citigroup executives also stated in a statement today that they're exploring the possibility of issuing stablecoins, and they see opportunities particularly in areas such as tokenized deposits and the storage of crypto assets. So as essentially senators are going back and forward on essentially passing some sort of crypto regulations, Jamie Dimon has come out publicly stated that they don't want to fall behind as a bank. They want to get more involved in stablecoins and cryptocurrencies and blockchain space, because if they don't, then other companies that are inside the blockchain space, he's calling them the very smart people inside the blockchain space, who are essentially becoming a threat to the banking world by essentially applying for banking licensings and creating bank accounts and reward systems. They're going to compete with us. He's just referring to Ripple. Ripple is going to one day be able to essentially go head to head with JP Morgan. This is why I said a while ago that the people that were behind essentially the SEC going after Ripple and slowing them down inside the United States could have been people like essentially JP Morgan. Because JP Morgan essentially putting pressure on the SEC to go after Ripple a very long time ago helped JP Morgan build some sort of a payment system of their own on Ethereum's network, which was very trash. But essentially, it helped them to get some sort of understanding of blockchain technology, because they knew companies like Ripple will advance really quick. And with his statements today, essentially stating that, that Jamie Dimon stated that fintech companies, Ripple, trying to create alternatives to traditional banking systems pose a threat, saying these guys are very smart. They want to create bank accounts, access payment systems, and offer reward programs. It's just all referring to Ripple. But anyways, JP Morgan sees the benefits of cryptocurrencies and why, essentially they need to adapt more, while senators are on voting mode right now. Moving on from JP Morgan's statements, Jamie Dimon's statements on not getting left behind, to strategy. But before we talk about strategy, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there, and then we'll go straight into the next news on tonight's live. Let's see where we're at. We were at here. Are they challenging CBDCs? Yes, by the looks of it, the anti-CBDC bill. Good question, Shelley, because the anti-CBDC bill, by the looks of it, is not going to pass. So the bills that have a higher chance of passing would be the Genius one, which first time round, it got a fail, but there's still second voting to go, and the Clarity Act. However, the stablecoin bill, the anti-CBDC bill, that one's a guaranteed no on both times of voting, by the looks of it. Is the second voting session today? I think so, if I'm not mistaken. Why is everyone asking about Atkins and XRP? Has there been a statement for any news? No, not that I'm aware of. Harvest essentially. And then out of all these serious conversations, you get one more on inside the comment section coming out of nowhere. Can everybody spam the chat with thumbs up, rocket emojis, or any emoji you want to go for, so that this comment isn't the first comment everybody sees when they come into the live? Unfortunately, I can't remove moronic comments. Doesn't let me. But CMF members, spam the chat right now with likes and emojis of rockets and whatever you want emoji to put down, just so that this isn't the first comment people get to see. This person. Now, strategy. Strategy shares surge aimed essentially S&P 500 and Bitcoin speculation. Strategy's significant stock movement reflects a Bitcoin influence, highlighting correlation with broader market indices. Investors watch closely as Strategy navigates potential changes in stock indexes and eligibility right now. So, Strategy essentially shares are surging right now, in the S&P 500 and the Bitcoin speculation that's going on right now. The surge in Strategy is essentially stock manifest from its aggressive conversion of reserves to Bitcoin holdings led by Michael Saylor. who envisions a steep rise in Bitcoin's future. Bitcoin could reach an astounding $21 million per coin in the next 21 years, is what Michael Saylor is saying right now. Executive chairman of strategy and strategy stock rallied, driven by its focus on Bitcoin's accumulation, with 5.8 billion essentially dollars in gains reported despite operational losses. This performance parallels Bitcoin's breakthrough past the $120,000 benchmark in 2025, essentially just a few days ago. Now, as the company's valuation hinges on Bitcoin's trajectory, its market presence signals shifts in equity volume and investor appetite for indirect crypto exposure. Analysts essentially note that increased volatility due to limited diversification. Insights into strategy reflects a potential financial trends and investors' behavior in crypto. Historical episodes suggest that ongoing volatility align with macroeconomic changes, and observers anticipate further impacts from regulatory assessments and market dynamics. Thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has essentially been spamming right now with likes of emojis, of fire flames and love hearts and rocket emojis. Thank you so much, everyone, for spamming the chat. So now the first comment isn't what essentially that was, and now it's this. Thank you so much to everybody for spamming the chat. Let's go CMF. But MicroStrategy, he essentially is coming out with some sort of a new strategy based on essentially what's happening right now inside the market space. He essentially is also stating that Bitcoin is going to reach $21 million per token in 21 years. Could Bitcoin reach $21 million per token in 21 years? Anything's possible. Now, banking frontier crossed. Standard Chartered Bank deploys institutional Bitcoin and ETH trading floor. That's a big move right there from Standard Chartered. So Standard Chartered Bank is now offering Bitcoin and Ethereum spot trading for institutional clients. The bank provides this service through its UK division. The launch meets institutional demand for secure digital asset access. Regulatory adjustments in the UK enabled this expansion to happen. Corporate and institutional investors can now trade both in cryptocurrencies. Transactions settle through UK-compliant systems. So Standard Chartered Bank is offering essentially Bitcoin and Ethereum services in the United Kingdom right now. A dedicated UK subsidiary operates the service. This links digital assets with traditional finance. CEO Bill Winters stated, "Digital assets are a core part of the financial service development. Client needs require secure, efficient trading under regulatory rules. The bank integrates trading into existing systems, and clients access institutional-grade custody and settlement options. Standard Chartered's custody solutions operate in markets like the UAE. These systems offer protected asset storages. This contrasts with Barclays' recent restriction. Barclays Bank will block debit card purchases of crypto assets. Consumer risk concerns promoted this decision. UK's regulatory changes supports this essentially service. The Financial Conduct Authority now endorses select investment products when it comes to cryptocurrencies. ETFs notes are included. Also, essentially, ETNs, in other words, the regulation authority monitors bank crypto exposure levels too, and non-derivable essential cryptocurrencies forwards and asset tokenizations under review. These essentially could yield new financial products for institutions. Traditional banks continue refining their approach to crypto engagements based on essentially market conditions and regulatory clarity. The initiative reflects growing institutional acceptance of cryptocurrencies as a viable asset. Custody solutions meeting strict security standards remain central to the adoption, and also trading volumes will determine the long-term viability of such banking services. Regulatory developments across major markets do continue essentially influencing institutional participation in terms of strategy. Standard Chartered Bank is about to be offering Bitcoin and Ethereum services, starting with Bitcoin and Ethereum services in the United Kingdom. It's a big play. Also, what's a big play is that Standard Chartered Bank coming out and saying that crypto is real money and is here to stay. Now, Bitwise is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Bitwise, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see what's happening there. So let's see where we're inside the comment section, and we'll go straight into the Bitwise news next. Let's see where we're at. We were at here. Yes, Miles, Nori, good to see you. How you been? Make me a moderator, Miles. Let's go, Christopher. I'll make you a moderator, no problem. Miles is going to be good to ensure our, is it going to be good to Miles is it going to be Miles is going to be good to ensure our assets. To ensure your assets? Elaborate on that, Callie. Hopefully all this negativity around the voting is just smoke and mirrors. I think that's exactly what it is. Something has to always bring down the market to essentially, for the next leg up. XRP Bank, XRP RL USD. Let's go, funky brother. Michael Saylor, essentially, hey, Emilio, good to see you. How you doing? Michael Saylor has really lost the plot, lives in a kook and with quantum computing technology, BTC could be generated more, as the essentially BlackRock said. It's true, yes. Good day, Miles of CMF. Mike, good to see you. How you been? Even Miles, sorry, only just joined. Busy start to the night shift. Let's go, Mac. No problem, brother. How you been? I missed you. Have I missed much? Quite a bit, actually, to be very honest. Nore is Magic Madness. Nore is Magic Madness. I'm back. Magic Madness. How you doing? Now, Bitwise. Bitwise adds a daily proof of reserves for Bitcoin ETFs. Bitwise Asset Management essentially has taken a major step towards transparency in the crypto investment world by launching daily proof of reserves for its Bitcoin ETF. You know who should take a page out of Bitwise's essentially book? MicroStrategy. When Michael Saylor went on that stage and said, ETF companies or Bitcoin companies or crypto companies should not be showing their reserves, that was major red flags. It's also to do with whenever Michael Saylor wants to sell, we don't know. So that essentially they have a clear path of selling without signing off essentially any sort of alarms on that sense. But, essentially Bitwise, on the other hand, is saying, we should be transparent, as you should be. This move marks Bitwise the first among its peers to provide such a frequent and detailed reporting, setting a new benchmark in accountability and transparency when it comes to crypto companies. With the rise of Bitcoin ETFs, investor trust is more important than ever before. Bitwise's latest initiative aims to assure investors that every share of its ETF is fully backed by real Bitcoin. This comes at a time when the crypto market is still recovering from past mishaps involving mismanaged funds and the lack of transparency. Proof of reserves is a method used to verify that a financial product like a crypto ETF holds the asset it claims to. Bitwise now publishes this data daily, showing the exact number of Bitcoin it holds and matching it against the number of ETF shares in circulation. These reports are made public and are verifiable on the blockchain, giving investors essentially real-time assurance. It's in a significant shift from monthly or quarterly essentially reporting that other essentially ETFs typically follow. The decision by Bitwise to provide daily reserves data is likely to essentially pressure other fund managers to follow in suit. Transparency has become a key factor in institutional adoption, and this move by Bitwise could improve confidence across the industry. For investors, it means one thing: greater peace of mind, knowing that your Bitcoin ETF shares are fully backed by Bitcoin every single day adds a much needed layer of security in an often volatile market space. What Bitwise is doing is incredibly, impressive. It's what every company should be doing inside the crypto space, showing daily reserves so that everybody is confirmed that what they say that they essentially hold is exactly what they hold. Honestly, Michael Saylor should take a page out their book from Bitwise's book. Now, moving on from that to CFTC and SEC. But before we talk about the CFTC and SEC, let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see where we're at. We were at here to do some kind of insurance, or to insure your cryptocurrencies. As long as you keep your cryptocurrencies in a cold storage wallet, you should be perfectly fine, to be fairly honest. Have you heard rumors about XRP burning at least 10% of their escrow? I don't believe it myself. Wouldn't make sense, as they have come so far without burning large amounts. The idea of the rumor regarding XRP burning Ripple burning essentially their XRP holdings is a rumor that's been suggested since the dawn of time, since essentially Ripple was created. The idea of XRP being burned in Ripple's escrows, it's always going to stay a rumor and most definitely never going to become true. And if Ripple wanted to burn any of their tokens, they would have burned it a long time ago, as you said yourself as well. It's correct. But yeah, Ripple's not burning any XRP whatsoever, not even 10% or 5%, not even 0.5%, to be fairly honest, from their own reserves. There's a reason Ripple printed a lot of XRPs, because it's going to be used worldwide. Some people think Ripple has too much essentially essentially XRP, or printed essentially or pre-mined too much XRP. The reality of it is, once essentially Ripple lives up to its potential, XRP lives up to its essentially potential of tokenizations or a cross-border payment system, or even a gas token, then you'll realize to yourself that 100 billion tokens wasn't that much tokens to be starting with. Now, erasing the truths of cryptocurrencies in a hostile era in the US. So, to prove the point that essentially Atkins is still pro-crypto, for example, the cryptocurrency world has scored another victory following Donald Trump's return to the White House. 2 separate investigations into crypto prediction platform Polymarket. Polymarket was a crypto platform where people get to bet on anything they want. People bet essentially on who becomes the next president. People are betting on Polymarket what is the next ETF to be approved. So you can pretty much bet on anything you want on Polymarket. Now, the reason Polymarket was investigated during Biden's essentially era, on the Biden circus freaks, the Biden administration, was because Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, came out and said that Polymarket, the crypto betting exchange platform, is betting on who becomes the next essentially politician of the who becomes the next president of the United States, and that is making essentially politicians look cheap. I'll be honest, a politician is the most scummiest job you could pretty much do in this world. Let's just be honest with ourselves. You lie for your teeth 24/7. You do absolutely nothing for the people. You steal tax-paying dollars. And at the end of your term, just so you can get more votes coming in for next term, you pretend to do 1 or 2 things out of the 99 things you promised day one from your own people. So nothing's degrading politicians in any sort of way, because Elizabeth Warren's exact words were essentially, Polymarket is degrading politicians. I think politicians do that to themselves, to be fairly honest. You don't need Polymarket to degrade politicians. They bring that upon themselves with the stealing, the lying, and everything else that comes with being a politician. But Polymarket, for example, got a slap on the wrist, and the case went away, which testified in final days of the Biden administration were closed under Trump. A source familiar with the matter revealed that the U.S. Department of Justice, the DOJ in other words, and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, informed Polymarket earlier this month that their investigation had ended. Polymarket gained significant traction during the 2024 election cycle when users used cryptocurrencies to predict political outcomes. However, this popularity sparked investigations into whether the platform was accepting transactions from US users in violation of previous agreements with federal regulators, which is an absolute load of bollocks. Pocahontas decided to essentially send the CFTC and the SEC, Gary Gensler, obviously her essentially attack dog, which was Gary Gensler, to go after Polymarket because they were predicting that Trump was going to win the election. Obviously, she didn't like that because it showed the real results of the election. The situation essentially escalated a week after the November 2024 elections. FBI agents raided the luxury New York apartment of Polymarket founder Shane before dawn. The 27-year-old CEO, in a statement on social media following the incident, described the move as a last-minute effort by Biden's administration to target companies affiliated with his political rivals and mocked the seizure of his phone. Now, these developments have been welcomed in the crypto community as a sign of the Trump administration's willingness to essentially reverse its crackdown on digital assets. The U.S. Congress essentially is expected to prevent Trump from the first comprehensive bill this week that includes industry-backed regulations. The CFTC investigation to Polymarket began when the platform fell under the agency's jurisdictions due to its prediction contracts, which essentially resembled future contracts. In January 2022, the parties agreed to block U.S. users from the platform. However, the investigations continued due to suspicions essentially on those restrictions that could have been circulated through methods such as VPNs. The closure of the investigation could pave the way for Polymarket to officially return to the U.S. markets, perhaps essentially through registrations with the CFTC as futures exchange or acquisitions of a licensed company. Polymarket aims to bring its prediction services to its social media platform by announcing a partnership with even Elon Musk and artificial intelligence company XAI. It also continues to raise capital with new investments, essentially rounds led by Peter Thiel's, the founder fund. So Polymarket essentially has been given a full green light to come back into the US market spaces by the looks of it. The CFTC and SEC once again showing they are pro-crypto when they dropped this case. They dropped another case. So if your question, if you still might have the senses of why is the SEC really pro-crypto? Well, they essentially closed every case they had regarding the SEC, regarding crypto companies. One left, just Ripple. It's just a very complicated case, but there's only one left. Now, But on the idea that are they pro crypto? Yes, they're very pro crypto. Otherwise, they would have closed any crypto cases. Now, so let's go. DFinance has launched an MSTR ETF with a weekly payout option. So obviously everybody knows what MSTR is. Essentially, MSTR is the stock for strategy, which is Michael Saylor's essentially company, which is the original Bitcoin strategy company. And one company has decided to take it to the next step with the MSTR stock. DFinance ETFs have introduced the DFinance Leveraged Long Plus Income MSTR ETF, offering weekly payouts since its launch essentially on May 1st, 2025. Now, the ETF essentially connects investors and interests in leverage exposure to MicroStrategy's indirectly tied to Bitcoin's market performance. The DFinance Leveraged Long Plus Income MSTR ETF launched on May 1st, 2025. It offers weekly payouts and aims to amplify exposure to MicroStrategy shares, targeting 150% to 200% of daily performance. Managed by DFinance's ETFs, led by CEO essentially Sylvia, the fund combines leverage exposure with crypto payouts to satisfy retail investors' demand for a thrill and income balance. Sylvia, also the CEO of DeFi Finance ETF, stated, retail investors want the thrill of leverage and the comfort of income. MST combines essentially leverage exposure to MicroStrategy's momentum with weekly payouts to balance the journey. It's a bold tactical option for today's essentially market space. And essentially, the ETF's launch aims to cater to investors seeking diversification, exposure to MicroStrategy's moves. Market watchers are keen on its connections to Bitcoin's volatile nature through MSTR holdings. Despite essentially its appeal, the ETF resilience on MicroStrategy stocks introduces risk essentially linked to Bitcoin's price shifts and potentially affecting both the share value and the payout stability. Income essentially focused ETFs have gained traction during periods of high asset volatility. Past trends also show that the essential returns may suffer during downtrends essentially of underlying assets like those linked to MSTR and Bitcoin. Experts view the fund setup involving leverage and option strategies as precautionary, with future essentially outcomes hinging on cryptocurrency markets and trends and MicroStrategy strict decisions. If you are somebody that's into leverage trading, MST stock essentially is a leveraged version of MSTR stock. If anybody wants to go and check it out. If you know it's stock trading, then this isn't the perfect news for you. But another company has taken interest essentially on MSTR stock by turning it into a leverage asset. Now, Bitcoin's remarkable stability. Deutsche Bank confirms the maturing of the crypto bank. So Deutsche Bank has come forward and stated that the crypto market has matured and is still maturing even further. In a significant development for the digital asset world, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the pioneering cryptocurrency, is increasingly demonstrating characteristics of a mature asset class. This transformation is underscored by a recent report from the Deutsche Bank, Germany's largest commercial bank, which highlights a notable decline in Bitcoin's volatility. This isn't just a fleeting trend, it's a profound shift signaling a new era for the crypto markets, one where stability and broader acceptance are becoming the norm rather than the exception. Okay, Shelly has just put inside the comment section, and Ripple, how you doing? How's things? Shelly, thank you for the update. Justin, the US House will not vote again today on pro-crypto legislations. Okay, so tomorrow we're going to expect more essentially votings. Thank you for that, Shelly. And Ripple, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? So for years, Bitcoin's volatility was essentially its identity. Its price swings were legendary, offering both the gains and the gut-wrenching losses. This inherent essentially unpredictability often deteriorated traditional investors and large institutions who prioritize stability and predictable returns. However, Deutsche Bank's analysis, as reported by CoinDesk, reveals a compelling essentially narrative. Despite Bitcoin's record-breaking rallies, its volatility essentially has significantly decreased. What does this mean for the future of digital assets? Historically, Bitcoin's price movements were heavily influenced by retail investors and sentiments and news cycles and speculative trading. Large price swings could occur with minimal trading volume. Now, the landscape is evolving. Increased liquidity, a wider area of sophisticated trading instruments, referring to the ETFs, and the entry of more diverse, essentially, participants are collectively contributing to a more stable environment. This shift is crucial for Bitcoin to transcend into a speculative asset label and be recognized as a legitimate investment vehicle. One of the primary catalysts behind Bitcoin's newfound stability is the surging wave of institutional adoption, or essentially when it comes to cryptocurrencies. What began as a niche interest for tech-savvy individuals is now captured the attention and the capital of some of the world's most essentially conservative financial entities. Pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and large asset managers are no longer just observing. Many are actively allocating capital to Bitcoin and other digital assets, the bank stated. Why are these traditional giants entering the fray? The answer lies in diversification, inflation hedging potential, and the recognition of Bitcoin as a legitimate, essentially, asset class. Their entry brings significant capital, but more importantly, it brings a long-term investment horizon. Unlike retail traders who might panic and sell during downtrends, institutions often buy and hold, providing a much more stronger flow for the market. When institutions buy a certain asset, they tend to hold it for 5 years before they sell it. When a retail person buys an asset, if there's any shakiness that happens, a retail person tends to sell and essentially panic sell. Institutions don't panic sell. They buy a certain asset, hold it for 5 years. If they wanted to hold it essentially longer, but they're not selling within that 5 years unless obviously the company or the asset they're holding is linked to something that's about to completely collapse. Other than that, they never panic sell. They don't care about the idea of losing 1,000, essentially millions of dollars, because they know they gain it back straight after when the market rebounces. Unless, as I said, if they know that particular company is about to go completely Titanic. Downtrends, essentially, institutions often buy and hold, now providing a stronger flow for the market. This long-term perspective naturally dampens short-term price fluctuations. The fact that Deutsche Bank, a titan of traditional finance with a history spanning over 150 years as a bank, is issuing such a report on cryptocurrency's maturity is incredibly significant. For long-term, major banks maintain a speculative, essentially, if not outright dismissive stance towards cryptocurrencies. Their pivot, even essentially if cautious, signals a broader acceptance within the traditional financial establishment. Deutsche Bank's analysis isn't merely an observation, it's an acknowledgement that Bitcoin essentially is evolving and cryptocurrencies is evolving into an asset class that warrants serious consideration alongside traditional assets. When a bank of this stature essentially highlights decreasing volatility and the role of institutional adoption, it lends immense credibility to the cryptocurrency space. This perspective can influence other major financial players and even policymakers, accelerating the integration of digital assets into mainstream finance. The report validates their long-term, essentially held beliefs by crypto prominence that Bitcoin, despite its turbulent youth, proposes essentially the fundamental characteristics to become a resilient and enduring store of value. It's a powerful, essentially, endorsement that could encourage more conservative investors like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds to explore the allocation to digital assets and further solidifying essentially the market stability. The findings from Deutsche Bank paints a very clear picture that crypto is shedding essentially its Wild West image and maturing into a sophisticated asset class. The convergence essentially of declining volatility, increasing institutional adoption, and growing regulatory clarity is fundamentally reshaping the entire crypto market. This evolution is not just a essentially statistical report, it's a profound transformation that makes crypto increasingly appealing to a broader spectrum of investors, from individual enthusiasms to massive sovereign wealth funds. The endorsement from vulnerable essentially institutions like Deutsche Bank serves as a powerful signal, reinforcing the idea that digital assets are here to stay and will play a very increasingly essentially vital role in the global financial landscape. As Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies continue its journey towards a greater stability, it opens up an unprecedented opportunities for long-term growth and integration, promising a future where digital assets are cornerstones of diverse investment portfolios. So, Deutsche Bank has come out today with a report regarding Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, calling the crypto space a mature place now, saying that the crypto space has shed away the label of speculative or essentially Ponzi scheme or so on. And now the crypto space, even in their eyes, is seen as a much more mature place that people should be looking into, institutions should be looking into and entering into, that cryptocurrencies are the cornerstone of the financial sector now, the traditional market space. Big words from a very, very big bank. 150 years that essentially that bank has been established. 150 years. It's an absolute titan as a German bank, and titan as an EU bank, to be fairly honest. Now, moving on from that news to Trump. But before we go to Trump, before we go through Trump news, let's go inside the comment section first. I just want to add something on the update that Shelley gave us as well. Honestly, Shelley, thank you so much for a quick update regarding the House votes. I'm guessing the reason why the US House will not be voting again today is because they want to find out why those 13 Republicans voted essentially not, why they voted no and not in favor of the Genius Act bill. I think that's the main reason of why they cancelled voting today, the second voting essentially today on that bill, because they want to know why those 13 Republicans all of a sudden joined the Democrats on voting no when it comes to a Genius Act bill, stablecoin bill. And I'm guessing the second round of votings we're going to be having on the Genius Act, it's going to pass through. So smoke and mirrors, in other words. Now, or essentially they want to realize who's making them say no. My guess would be Pocahontas and companies that don't want those regulations passing, like Tether. Also, essentially, well, Pocahontas gets paid to do something, and Pocahontas puts pressure on the rest of the people. Maxine Waters puts pressure on Democrats as well. Let's see how that one plays out. But I would say good call, very good call on not doing the votes today and leaving the votes for another day, essentially even tomorrow, the day after, because they have to get to the bottom of why those 13 Republicans all of a sudden said no. Is XRP still the chosen one, and why are we so patient for years? And why are we so patient for years? Harris, great question. Is XRP still the chosen one? In my point of view, yes. It's far more superior than essentially any other asset out there, in my opinion. Going from essentially its institutional contracts that are in play, the acquisitions it's making, the licensing it's essentially achieving for itself worldwide, applying for a banking license, applying for a Fed account, they get XRP essentially into a Fed master account. Every single move Ripple has pulled is to advance XRP to a whole nother level once everything is set into play. So why have been patient for so many years on XRP? Because these types of things take time. You cannot essentially make the world go into a digital space overnight. You cannot essentially make Swift collapse overnight and go into this digital space. There's a lot of things that cannot be done overnight, that needs essentially time to, one, mature, and essentially two, they get the legislation accompanied to it, and they get institutions on board and get regulators on board and get banks on board. It takes a lot of time to pull that off. So that's why we've been patient with essentially companies like Ripple, or essentially their assets like XRP. And another reason why is because, well, you can see what they've achieved. The list of partnerships Ripple has is tremendous. The amount of licenses they have worldwide is also tremendous. Applying for that banking charter now, having one essentially a major license in New York, two, applying for a banking license, essentially a banking charter license, and also applying for a Fed account, even better, cherry on top. So there are many reasons why we hold Ripple, essentially why we have faith in Ripple, and why we hold XRP. Many reasons, and they're all positive. But the reason why we're holding essentially for years is because you can't expect those things to happen overnight. So obviously it's going to be taking time. Only in Hollywood, two companies sign a contract and everybody becomes millionaires the next day. In the real world, that's not how things work. Things take time. And the good thing is we're getting to a stage of a lot of things happening at the same time, with the regulations, the House report that's coming out, essentially, the cases that's going on right now. A lot of things are happening at the exact same time. So that's why. People die, do many X and get out. XRP, are we waiting for a decade? The reason why we're waiting for a long time, again, is because of what it's trying to achieve. Look, you got to understand why you hold an asset like XRP. An asset like XRP isn't like any other asset out there, okay? So, for example, as I said previously, a long time ago, about 2 years ago, what Ripple is trying to achieve is very, very different to any other cryptocurrency out there, to be fairly honest. For example, a crypto company out there that's trying to design an app, is trying to design an AI platform, is trying to design a Web3 platform, is trying to design a gaming platform. If those products fail and it has a very big user base, nobody cares. Let's say a big AI company comes forward inside the crypto space and builds an AI platform, or Solana essentially builds an AI platform, or so on, and millions of people are using that platform. If that platform has an outage of 4 hours, nobody cares. People will be angry and so on, but that's about it. People will be saying on X, oh, this platform, has stopped for 4 hours and so on and so on. A platform like what Ripple is trying to create is change an entire financial landscape. If we have an outage on what Ripple is trying to achieve, let's say for 4 hours, Ripple's platform doesn't work. XRP transactions aren't going through for 4 hours, and the world essentially is a part of the XRP essentially ledger. All the banks are a part of the XRP ledger. If it doesn't work in any sort of a way, and there's 4 hours of people not being able to buy groceries, pay their mortgage, pay their rent, pay their car financing, then it's going to be havoc, absolute havoc. People will start protesting, screaming, and shouting. So you've got to realize the difference of what Ripple's trying to achieve and what a blockchain company that's doing a Web3 platform, an AI platform, a gaming platform, a meme coin platform, a DAO platform, an NFT platform, all those platforms, if they fail or have outage issues, nobody cares. People will be angry, that's about it. But if you can't pay your mortgage, you can't pay your loans, you can't pay your car payments, you can't buy groceries, you can't feed your family, or so on, because your money's trapped on the XRP ledger because of outage issues, then that's a big deal. So they have to be, as I said previously, not 100% sure. They have to be 1 billion% sure before they make us essentially switch over to a completely digital ledger distributed technology, essentially platform for finances. They have to be 1 billion% sure to go on DLT before they confirm anything. So what Ripple's trying to achieve is 10 times more different, or 1,000 times more different to any other platform out there. So that is why essentially XRP is not for the short-term play. It's not for people who want quick gains. It's for generational wealth. That's what XRP is. It's generational wealth. And some people might say, no, XRP is not generational wealth, and no, it's trash, and no, it's this. Everybody has an opinion. As I said before, everybody's entitled to an opinion, but opinions are like, essentially oxygen. Opinions on facts, and pretty much facts are facts. Fact of the matter is, Ripple has a tremendous amount of licensings. They've made a tremendous amount of acquisitions, and they're applying for a banking license, and they're applying for a Fed account. It speaks for itself. And they have a CBDC platform. JP Morgan said, what are they afraid of? JP Morgan said they are afraid that CBDCs is going to become the dominant currency, not stable coins. Who has a CBDC platform from day one? Ripple. Who has multiple CBDC awards? Ripple. Who essentially put their CBDC platform for testing purposes and Paolo? Ripple. Who's a part of the world? Who's been invited to the World Economic Forum? Ripple. Multiple times. And people say, oh, anybody can go to the World Economic Forum and do speeches. Do you think the World Economic Forum is going to open their doors to Shiba Inu? Do you think the World Economic Forum is going to open up the doors essentially to any other crypto project? Why didn't they? Why didn't any other crypto project essentially be invited to do speeches at the World Economic Forum? Is it because they didn't open their doors to them? So you've got to realize who Ripple is working with, what they're trying to achieve. It's 1 billion times different to what anybody else is trying to achieve inside the crypto space. And they have to be 1 billion times confirmed before they do any sort of essentially switches of slowly going into that financial system, that it's confirmed that there's going to be no hacks, no issues with payments whatsoever worldwide. Remember that. Bad wishes, Shelly. They're probably trying to. So Harris, keep that in mind, and everybody else that maybe starts having some doubts or reading X posts, because a lot of people like to still criticize XRP, but honestly, everyone to their own. It can't be. It can possibly be because of the mishandling of the Epstein list as well. They're probably trying to send a message to release the list, or they'll keep voting against these bills. That's also a possibility as well regarding the Epstein list. But let's just be honest, the Democrats are also fishing. The Democrats 1 billion% are also on that list. The Epstein list has a mixture of Republicans and Democrats on that list. The idea that the Democrats might be clean from a essentially Epstein list is a far-fetched situation. Not saying you're suggesting any sort of way, Kerry, but the Democrats are just trying to play the angel card. Let me put this into perspective. Honestly, let me just put this into perspective. The Epstein situation that's going on right now, where I stand is that Trump should have shown the Epstein list. So I think, in my point of view, Trump did a very wrong thing. And this is probably the second time I've said Trump has done the wrong thing. The first time I said Trump has done the wrong thing was the way he handled the Iran nuclear power situation, where I said Trump is making a mistake trying to come to some sort of a trade deal with Iran's government, and that Iran's government needs to be removed. That was the first time I said Trump has done a big, essentially, mistake. His second mistake was not releasing the Epstein list. But let me just make one thing very, essentially, a very good point I need to make. The Democrats right now are coming out and saying that Trump and the Republicans are playing dirty. Why are they not releasing the Epstein list and so on? And essentially, we would have released the Epstein list. We're going to vote to release the Epstein list and so on. Well, why didn't you? Biden was president for the longest time. Why didn't the Democrats release the essentially Epstein list? Why didn't Biden release the Epstein list? Why didn't essentially Biden's administration release the Epstein list? Why did nobody from Biden's essentially team release the Epstein list? But all of a sudden now Trump doesn't want to release it. The Democrats are coming out and essentially saying that we would have released the list. Then why didn't you? All the Biden supporters or the Biden's previous administration are coming out and saying Trump is playing dirty. Trump is not releasing the Epstein. Well, why didn't you release it? The thing with politicians is they always try to blame each other, and when one doesn't do the other, they essentially come out and play the angel card. Right now, the Democrat Party is coming out and saying, we're angels, we are clean, we haven't done anything wrong, and the Republican Party is hiding the Epstein list from the people. So why did you hide the Epstein list from the people, the Democratic Party? Why did Biden administration hide it from essentially the retail section of the United States? Why did essentially Biden himself not release the list? Because he didn't want to also. So the Democrats are really playing essentially this angel card all of a sudden for some reason, but they could have released the list as well, and they didn't. And now they're saying, oh, we would have released it. No, you wouldn't have, because you didn't. Now, on the list, I say it should be released 100%. And anybody on that list, no matter how powerful they are, they should be prosecuted. The other thing, if Trump isn't releasing the list, it's not because Trump is on that list, in my point of view. The reason why I'm guessing Trump essentially is not releasing the list is because Trump can use that list to his leverage. Whatever evidence is on that list, Trump can use that to his leverage by making certain people do what he wants. Or he release the evidence on them. So in my point of view, Trump might be playing essentially, using it as an advantage, where he now has a list of the most powerful people who have incriminated themselves by doing sexual acts essentially on certain people, and Trump can use that list to his leverage to make certain people do certain things in the world of politics. And that's essentially, Trump sees it as a much more powerful card if he uses it as leverage than just to come out with the information and essentially remove a lot of people and replace them with new people around him. Because on that list, I'm guessing it's going to be major senators from both sides, Republicans and Democrats and liberals. It's going to be essentially a list of governors, list of judges, supreme judges, and so on. I think there's going to be a major, arrest all over the U.S. government, and everybody needs to be replaced. So there's reasons of why they're not releasing it. Again, I stand on the side of it should be released 100%. The Epstein list should be released 100%. It should be, because everybody who was on that list deserves to be in prison for life, in my point of view. I don't even care if you just fly to that island and stay 10 minutes and came back. If you touch that island, even for a second, you deserve to be in prison for the rest of your life. So I'm on the side of that list should be released 100%. But I think Trump is playing the leverage card by leveraging essentially what he has on people. And also, the Democrats right now coming out and saying, oh, if we were in charge, we would have released the list. The Democrats were in charge. Biden's administration was in charge. Biden was the president of the United States, and he didn't release the list. So for them to come out now and say, oh, we would have released the list, no, you wouldn't have. So that's something people should know about regarding the Epstein list situation. They're probably trying to But bad wishes. Bad. I mean, is it worth them? Is it worth the waiting? Because if we spoke 1,000% US 26, then it's maybe not worth it. Wait 8+ years. We can die soon. Also, maybe I think different. No, Harris, you don't worry. We're en route. I mean, if XRP will be 100% used by the world, then it's worth. It's okay. Yeah, you can't blackmail people who are already exposed. The thing is that they're not exposed. We don't know who's on that list for sure. We don't know what evidence there is. So they're not fully exposed, to be fully honest. The people that are on the Epstein list, they're not fully exposed. We haven't seen any tapes. We haven't seen any of the, essentially, the recordings or the evidence on paper that's been written, or the pictures of what's really happened on that island. So it hasn't been fully exposed in any sort of way. And I'm guessing that is what Trump has on his desk right now. But yeah, there's criminals on both sides, as essentially Thompson put it as well. Politicians in general, I've said this since day one. Politicians are the most scummiest people you can ever meet. They are thieves, lie through their teeth 24/7, promise 99 things and only do 2 things when their term is coming to an end, and steal taxpayer money. Politicians are the most scummiest people ever. That's why I've never trusted any politician. The only person I saw essentially as favorable was Trump, due to what he's going to be doing for the crypto space and how he puts pressure on different countries around the world. And also, some people, have difficulty also understanding why the US always needs to be in control. The situation on why the US always needs to be on control. So a lot of people hate the US being in control of the world. They're saying, everybody should have a voice. Every country around the world should have a voice, and so on. And, the US shouldn't be the long-lasting voice, and so on. If the US wasn't in control of the world, Russia would have swallowed Ukraine a long time ago. And China would have taken Taiwan and probably worked their way down to New Zealand and Australia. South Korea and North Korea would have been in war 24/7. The Middle East probably would have been in war 24/7. America is the country that's stopping all these scenarios from happening, from the takeovers happening. Wars will always happen, but the takeover is a situation. So that's why you need a country like America in control, because if there was no one in control, China would have taken Taiwan in 5 seconds. And then they would have worked their way down, honestly, to New Zealand and Australia. But yeah, 100%, they need to release the list. I'm on the side of they need to release it. If Trump wants to use it as leverage or blackmail, as a business tactic, but I'm on the side of it needs to be released 100%. It needs to be released 100%. Every single person on that list needs to be prosecuted, and life imprisonment needs to happen. Now, hello again, beautiful people. Let's go, Thompson. They are both criminals on either side. I agree 100%. Exactly. That's why it won't be released. Let's go, Susie. Facts. Hi, Miles and CMF. Have you talked about the US votes on crypto today? I have, yes. The first round of votings was a no. The second round is not going to be today. It's going to be tomorrow, the day after. Aggressive killers versus conservative killers. Either way, they are killers. Facts. Facts. Hands off the... yeah, honestly, let it be known for all. Release the list. I agree 100%, Ray. Let's go, facts. Nothing more than a bunch of thieves, liars. I agree. These are professional actors and actresses. I agree, Thompson, 100%. I've never trusted politicians. But, moving on, but also sticking to a topic of Trump. Trump has urged, once again, the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates. So even though it might be Jerome Powell's last few days as the Fed chairman, Trump is still putting pressure on Jerome Powell to essentially do some sort of rate cuts for the market space. So here it is. President Donald Trump urged the US Federal Reserve to lower interest rates. stating that they are at least 3 points too high in his public addresses. Jerome Powell Fed policy faces essentially scrutiny affecting financial markets and cryptocurrency volatility with no essentially direct impact yet reported. Now, Donald Trump recently expressed dissatisfaction with the current interest rates and levels during his statements. He highlighted the high refinancing cost to the US government and criticized the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, reluctant to do any sort of interest rate cuts. Now, on that aspect, Susan Collins, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, emphasized the patience regarding interest rate cuts at the Washington event today. The event underlines the Fed's cautious approach against rushing rate cuts, which affects risk asset markets, including cryptocurrencies. Per Collins' economic stability, it allows for careful assessment of economic data before adjusting rates. So Susan Collins, who is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, came out and said, let's not put pressure on Jerome Powell to do rate cuts because it actually works out in favor of cryptocurrencies, is what she's trying to say. Susan Collins highlighted the challenges of calibrating essentially appropriate policies in current economic conditions. As a voting member of the FOMC, her statements carry significant weight. She advocates an actively patient stance, stressing before making any sort of rate decisions. Calibrating essentially appropriate policies in this context is challenging. Continued overall solid economic conditions enable the Fed to take the time to carefully assess the wide range of economic data, Susan M. Collins said, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Collins' comments influence market expectations affecting cryptocurrencies. While specific crypto mentions were absent, her stance impacts broader risk sentiments, dampening essentially short-term speculative inflows seen in previous cycles. Historically, delayed essentially Fed rate cuts during inflationary periods have led to temporary risk asset pullbacks, affecting DeFi protocols and layer 1 altcoins. This tendency underscores the cooling effects on speculative rallies. When monetary policies remains tight, no direct liquidity injections or instrumental interventions followed Collins' remarks. However, her statements reinforces a data-driven approach with a broader risk asset essentially environment, feeling the weight of cautious Fed policies and caution monitoring essentially of economic indicators seem inevitable. So Collins coming out essentially as the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, saying that, we should be cautious regarding rate cuts, and Jerome Powell should be doing rate cuts at the perfect time, not push to do rate cuts, and that rate cuts actually work out in favor of cryptocurrencies, and that we don't want that for now, is what she's trying to say. Honestly, I can't wait for the day Jerome Powell resigns or gets kicked out. It's like Gary Gensler all over again with this man. Now, moving on from that to Ripple. Ripple is seeking a MiCA license for EU crypto expansion. Now, some of you might have heard this news, some of you might not have heard this news, but here are the details. Ripple is reportedly planning to secure a MiCA license aiming to expand its cryptocurrency and stablecoin services across Europe, according to a recent company statement. Ripple Labs Inc. plans to expand its European operations by securing an MiCA essential license focusing on regulatory compliance. This move aligns Ripple with other firms operating under EU regulations such as Coinbase and Bitstamp. The company initiative involves key figures including Brad Garlinghouse, CEO, through official communication stemmed from Ripple's spokesperson. This approach highlights Ripple's commitment to meeting European regulatory standards. The company intends to comply with MiCA because it sees significant opportunities in the European market. Ripple's spokesperson, essentially Ripple's strategy could significantly impact XRP and RLUSD. Essentially, enhanced compliance may increase market confidence and reduce legal risk, potentially attracting more institutional investors. Financial essential implications include increased institutional participation in Ripple offerings, though specific funding details are undisclosed. The move places Ripple alongside major players in the EU regulatory framework. Ripple's past regulatory challenges, such as the SEC case, provides context for its current compliance efforts. Historical trends suggest that securing essentially such licenses enhances market confidence and adoption. Ripple MiCA license pursuit could influence crypto market dynamics, prompting similar strategies among competitors. And regulatory essential understanding may facilitate technological essential innovations and financial growth avenues in the EU crypto landscape. An absolute brilliant move from Ripple, applying for MiCA license and trying to broaden their reach. And in their own words, essentially for XRP and RLUSD to be able to expand in a regulated manner inside the EU. Brilliant move. Now, also on the topic of XRP, the SEC passes a ProShares Ultra XRP ETF. So technically we have a green light XRP ETF, but here it is. So in a groundbreaking move for the cryptocurrency market, the US SEC has approved the listing of the ProShares Ultra XRP ETF. If you're wondering to yourself, what is a ProShares Ultra XRP ETF that's just been greenlighted by the SEC? Well, the announcement essentially was made official through a letter issued by the New York Stock Exchange, ACRA, addressed to the SEC's Division of Corporate Finance. The letter confirms the New York Stock Exchange, ACRA, certification of the ETF's registration under the Exchange Act of 1934. This regulatory milestone was shared by essentially, XRP community and other members, and the ProShares Ultra XRP ETF is the first leveraged exchange-traded fund focused solely on XRP. Unlike standard ETFs, an Ultra ETF is designed to offer magnified exposure to daily price movements of its underlying asset. In this case, the fund will provide investors with a 2x exposure to XRP, meaning that if XRP gains 5% in a day, the ETF could deliver approximately a 10% return and vice versa for losses. ProShares, a veteran in ETF spaces, made history back in 2021 when, by launching the first ever Bitcoin futures ETF, its entry into XRP not only marks a new chapter in the diversification of crypto investment products, but also underscores the growing institutional demand for alternatives to Bitcoin and Ethereum. This ETF approval follows years of legal uncertainty surrounding XRP regulatory status. However, the tide began to turn in July 2023 when the US District, essentially Judge Torres, ruled that XRP sales on secondary markets are not essentially any sort of securities. This growing legal clarity has reinitiated essentially institutional interest in XRP, with many seeing ProShares ETF as a signal of Wall Street's growing trust in the asset compliance status on long-term potentials. The ETF launch coincides with major developments in Ripple's ecosystem. The company recently rolled out essentially all the RLUSD US dollar-backed stablecoin, which has the approvals, and continues to build momentum in real-world asset tokenization and cross-border payment infrastructures. XRP sits at the center of these efforts, providing liquidity for financial institutions and decentralized platforms alike. With XRP recently crossing the $3 threshold and performing a bullish long-term technical patterns, many analysts believe that this ETF could catalyze a fresh wave of investments, especially from hedge funds and asset managers and crypto-savvy retail traders. The ProShares Ultra XRP ETF is not just a product, it's a landmark. It opens the door for traditional investors to gain leveraged exposure to one of the most battled, tested digital assets out there. It also marks a broader shift in how XRP is perceived and no longer just a cross-border utility token, but as a legitimate financial instrument recognized by legacy institutions. As demand for XRP investment vehicles grows, the SEC approval signals a maturing regulatory environment and a wider essentially embracing of digital assets in traditional finance. So, SEC approves an XRP ETF, an XRP Ultra ETF, which is like an XRP leverage ETF. If the SEC is against Ripple still, or essentially the reasons of why they're not removing this essentially appeal situations, or if they hate Ripple or still against Ripple and any sort of or anti-crypto, then why would they approve an XRP Ultra ETF? They could have postponed that one also, but they approved it. Which means they're not which means the SEC is not anti-crypto, it's still pro-crypto, and that the Ripple case is going to come to an end very, very soon. Otherwise, if they were still anti-crypto and hated Ripple for some reason or hated XRP, they would have never approved an XRP ETF Ultra, which gives exposure to institutions to XRP, but in a leveraged status. And on that note, we have also reached the endings of tonight's live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, this is called the CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Mouse Family, and my name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time, where essentially I share the most recent news that's happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much vital information for you to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. And on tonight's live, we talked about essentially XRP ETF actually getting some sort of a great, essentially, approval. We talked about the MiCA license in terms of Ripple expanding into the EU market space. We also went through news regarding Jerome Powell on the rate cut situation. We talked about on tonight's live regarding the situations of Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies remarkable statement regarding Deutsche Bank's perspective, how the crypto space is maturing. We talked about DFinance launching an MSTR ETF. We also went through news on tonight's live regarding the matters of cryptocurrencies essentially and the US and the SEC and CFTC situation. We talked about tonight's live regarding Bitwise adding daily proofs to their reserves of Bitcoin ETFs. We also went through news regarding the Banking Frontier Standard Chartered offering crypto services. We talked about tonight's live regarding strategy shares and surge and S&P 500 situations. We went through news on tonight's live regarding JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon's perspective, and we went through news on tonight's live regarding tariff situations, the Tom Hemmer situation regarding voting of cryptocurrencies, the week of crypto legislations, and so on. If you missed this live show and you tuned in a bit late, definitely replay this live show so you understand what's happening around the world, because we talked about a lot of different types of topics on tonight's live and some side topics as well. Now, before we do go, let's go to the comment section. And if anybody has any last minute questions, go for it as well, CMF members. I'm here as always to answer any questions you may have. So let's go to the comment section before we do leave. Let's see where we're at. We were at here. Nevertheless, they are the real essentially thugs that wear suits and ties versus those who barely wear their pants correctly, or someone who exposes their nasty cleavage for attention. Is absolutely sickening. I agree 100%, Thompson. Absolutely, I agree. Thanks, Miles. New from Stormy. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual, Stormy. Night, Miles and CMF. Pablo. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thanks, Miles. Have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow, same time. Let's go, Autistic. Same time as usual. Thank you, Ton Miles. Really appreciate all you do. Good night, all. Lena, let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Good job, Miles. Appreciate all you do for our community. Have an awesome night. Let's go, Christopher. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Thanks, Miles. Great live as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Jason, let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Oh man, you always have great content, but it's so short. However, do not be discouraged. Just keep up the great work. You are so needed in this critical juncture, in this very moment. Let's go, Thompson. Thank you so much. The live show is an hour and a half, but time does fly by when you're having fun. Outstanding live share, like, comment, and support. Take care, CMF. Let's go, Ray. See you tomorrow at the same time as usual. Many blessings to you. Well, boss. Let's go, Thompson. See you tomorrow, same time as usual, brother. Great news, Miles. Thanks and good night, everyone. Bull XRP. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. And I'll see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual, 10 p.m. London time for the next episode of CMF Live tomorrow. For episode 335, tune in tomorrow. And the disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. If you have already liked and retweeted this live on X, thank you so much, CMF members. If you haven't liked and retweeted this live, just take 5 seconds to like and retweet this live. It really does help, essentially, to show your appreciation and to grow this family, CMF members. So if you enjoyed this live, drop a like, drop a retweet, and drop a comment outside the live. If you watch us on YouTube, just drop a like and drop a comment. I will be seeing everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. It goes by so fast. Night, Susie. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. It really does. Time flies by really quick. But yeah, this live show is 1 hour and 30 minutes long. 1 hour and 30 minutes essentially does fly by really quick, doesn't it? Sometimes it's 1 hour and 40 minutes or 1 hour and 50 minutes. Depends. Good night, Miles. God bless. Let's go, Cali. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual. Thanks, Miles, and current trending. Let's go, Shelly. See you tomorrow, sometimes as usual as well. Thanks so much. And we are doing tremendous on the views right now. We're at 1,256 views. Absolutely incredible. Drop a like, drop a follow. If you already have subscribed and followed, thank you so much. If you already liked and retweeted, thank you so much. If you haven't, retweet, like, follow, subscribe. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you're around the world. Love you all. See everybody tomorrow at 10 p.m. London time, once again, for episode 335 tomorrow.